Good evening and welcome back. We'll start the news off with a nice story, a good story, a feels good story, with the so-called NHS Spitfire who tours the south of England hospitals. An advantage of being in the south is that you get to see quite a few Spitfires flying by, especially if you're near Goodwood in Chichester, which is a few dozen miles west of Brighton, to put it into scale. And this specially painted Spitfire saying thank you NHS on the bottom is one example of that. So, a Spitfire bearing the names of thousands of heroes of the coronavirus pandemic has performed flypast of hospitals across the south of England, including Southend, Medway, Canterbury, Margate, Dover, Folkestone, Ashford, Hastings, Bexhill, Eastbourne, Brighton, Worthing, Bognor Regis, Chichester, Portsmouth, Newport, Poole, Bournemouth, Southampton and Salisbury, including stopping at Goodwood, as we see here, as it is most well known at the moment for being at Goodwood. And I think it's particularly pertinent that they include the Spitfire, because you might think, well, we've had several wars since, we've been producing far better aircraft than the Spitfire, that if you put the Spitfire against a Eurofighter, then the Eurofighter is going to win every day of the week. And yes, of course it is. But the Spitfire seems to be emblematic of the last great mechanical aircraft. It's the last great piston engine aircraft. And you might say, well, the last great mechanical one was the English Electric Lightning before computers took over, or the last great piston one was either the Sea Vixen, which was a take on the Mosquito, or the Sea Fury, which was kind of a combination of the Spitfire and Mustang. But I put it to you that the Spitfire was really the last great piston engine. And yes, you got various marks up until the 30s, changing from the Merlin engine to the Griffin engine, and the change is quite obvious once you know what you're looking for. But nonetheless, that was the last great piston-driven aircraft, not least because during the Battle of Britain, which by all means, yes, either the Hawker Hurricane or the Bristol Blenheim was the best aircraft, most likely the Hawker Hurricane for shooting down the most aircraft, being a stable gun platform and going after bombers instead of fighters. But the Spitfire went after the fighters. If it wasn't for the Spitfires, then the Hawker Hurricanes wouldn't have been able to do as well as they did. So the Supermarine Spitfire is there and is emblematic because of its iconic elliptical wing shape. And also, during the Battle of Britain, the average life expectancy for a pilot was just 4 weeks. If you were a newbie, you probably wouldn't last the day. You'd last a few hours. Your fuel tank would probably live longer than you did. And it was as simple as that. So it comes back to knowing that we had teenagers who understood the risk of doing what they were doing and would willingly do it nonetheless to fly above their homeland. And with the Churchill quote of, a good soldier did not fight because of what is in front of him, but because of what is behind him. And they would do that above the skies of southern England, because they knew what they were up against and what they were defending. And so they would willingly risk their lives, knowing that the odds were against them for returning home that same day, but they would do it. They would have on-the-job training because they had barely learned to fly, and if they had, it would be through the Gypsy Moth biplanes. But nonetheless, they would go up because of what was worth defending. And similarly for the Polish pilots as well in the Spitfires, that is why it has become so iconic, that we've had our ancestors and even grandparents or great-grandparents, living memory, that you'd have these pilots who would willingly die for the country as teenagers, knowing that what they were protecting was worth more than their lives, and they gave the ultimate sacrifice for that. And hence the famous "never have so many owed so much to so few," again, by Churchill. And that is why it is so iconic. And that is why, if they're trying to say something is difficult and worthy of wartime spirit, it's always the Second World War, and it is always the Spitfire. They're not going to bring out Shermans over this. It's always going to be the Spitfire. And we, of course, as Britons, have a fabulous fascination for the Spitfire ever since then, and using that as a fly-past machine with the sound of the Merlin engine that will make your hair stand up for any man worth his salt. It's immediately recognisable. It is iconic, not just the aircraft, but also the sound of the Merlin engine. That is what you will know and love, and that is why they use it. So, thank you. But, second story, more COVID related, is that more people are dying from bowel cancer than coronavirus. Figures reveal as leading medic says Britain has become obsessed with COVID deaths. So we've mentioned this before in terms of saying that you're going to have far more avoidable deaths from cancer than you have had from coronavirus. That because of COVID-19, people are not going to be going to the hospital and therefore dying from avoidable deaths, particularly because of elective surgery, and anything that could be caught early and is therefore treatable will be caught too late and will therefore become fatal. And, as the oncologist, a study of cancer, says, bowel cancer actually accounts for all of the coronavirus deaths. So then, if you decrease it by the amount that will become avoidable, you then have to bring in a few more different types of cancers. But nonetheless, cancer on its own, not including coronary heart disease, which is the main killer, is going to be more deadly, but by avoidable deaths, than the total amount by coronavirus. As in, if we did nothing and allowed people to get all the help that they needed, we would have had fewer total deaths because of it. So yes, we are now seeing a bit of a lag in that we're seeing more deaths, not by coronavirus, but by other things like cancer and coronary heart disease, CHD, because the people who needed help at the time weren't going to the hospital and are therefore dying from avoidable deaths. In fact, if you address bowel cancer early, fatality rate is 15%. Chance of dying is chance of living is 85%. If not, fatality rate jumps to 90%, meaning chance of living is only 10%. So, as you can see, it is a very fine line. And with the amount of new cases that they have each week of about 420, as they say here, by contrast, there are 319 bowel cancer deaths every week in the UK, based on an annual figure of 16,600 from the charity Cancer Research UK. That bowel cancer was common, 42,000 new cases every year, and while it can be cured in more than 90% of patients if spotted early, once it spreads, that drops to less than 15%. So with 42,000 new cases every year, that, say, if it cured in more than 90% of patients, which means you can have 4,200 dead, whereas if not, then you're going to be ending up with 6,300 living. That's it. So about 36,000 dead instead of 4,000. Ridiculous. But that is the state of play. That is how that is the point that things have gotten to, and unfortunately, it isn't just the case for bowel cancer. It's also the case for other forms of cancer and coronary heart disease. And if you prioritize one particular illness or disease, then of course you're pushing back other forms of disease or virus or fatal causing illness. And this is a thing that is seen time and time again in economics, and it's just as true as it is in economics as it is in healthcare, that you are attributing resources to a particular endeavour, and in doing so, you're reducing the amount of resources available for something else. So, the classic example is, of course, bridge building, that you put things into that bridge building. People think it's great, now a bridge is built. Yes, except you don't see everything else that was missed out on because they decided to build a bridge. And the other things, because of the rules of economics and that capitalism will make the most efficient choices, that you've missed out on better things because you decided to build that bridge. And the same goes for this, that because you decided to put so much energy and focus into the coronavirus, then the unseen effects are deaths from cancer, which didn't have to happen, they were avoidable, but because of the decision to put so much emphasis on coronavirus, Now, more people have died from cancer. And I know you might be thinking that, well, hey, cancer is pretty deadly. A lot of people die of cancer. It's the second highest cause of death in the UK. And you're completely correct. Yes. But bear in mind that you're also saying everybody dies. No death is avoidable. In which case, what's the point in doing anything? Because you're going to die anyway. You've just come down to nihilism. In which case, why bother curing any disease or getting anybody to live longer than the first illness? Or in fact, why bother living at all? Because eventually you're going to die. And if that is your point, and it isn't that you should get as many people to live as long as possible with the best life possible, then you've got your own problems to sort out about nihilism. That thinking that the final result is all that matters, instead of the journey validates the destination. Because Alan Watts says, life is not a journey, it's a dance. If it was a journey, you know where you're going, you'd end up there, you're done. Whereas as a dance, you dance around, you know you're going to end up, but you don't go there yet because you're enjoying what you're doing. And only when it's all done and you're happy and you're done and there's nothing else to do you finally end in that spot and the dance is over. So, if you're all for nihilism, then I sympathise, because I think that you haven't done enough in order to understand the value of life and living and the great things that can be accomplished through your life for those around you, and also just for your own intrinsic satisfaction. But what we're seeing here is, of course, something taking political precedence, and therefore the resources are being siphoned off towards coronavirus, and we're therefore missing out on other people who could have survived and could have treatment that we know what they need. But until this whole thing clears up and we decide that maybe everybody should be treated equally, it's gonna stay the same. So, on that sorry note, on that sordid note, let's just finish on a good clip. Until next time, have a good one.